And we are live for the Council of Google Plus After Show. This is hosted by the Bible BTWN, and I am John Wilkinson with the rest of the council. And tonight we have a special guest of Matt Slick, along with all the other people who wanted to join in. Like I said, here in FEMA Region 10. The reason why I say that is because probably Hillary is going to win, and we have to start designating ourselves in that particular area. So anyway, yeah, see what. Let's get the ball rolling.
So you still didn't answer my question about you and Sean McCrane kissing and making.
Yeah, I'll feed in. Give the answer. I'm gonna go grab a little something here and break, and then I just cooked that, so it's really good. Sorry. Okay.
I'm joking about the kissing.
Yeah, we did, and I'll tell you what happened. So, but here's a little bit of background information. It'll help make sense to more things, because when I explain, you'll see why. I don't really want this publicized, so I figure that people might be recording this anyway who I don't want to record, and so I'm going to be generic, and so that's no big deal. And basically, when I was on Sean's show before, I said basically to his daughters, he can't be a Christian if he's going to hold on to some of these things. And they were just trying to say thank you for me coming on the show. I still had the apologetics hat on. I'm standing, my back hurts a little bit. I still had the apologetics hat on, and so I said, yeah, they're not even, might not be saved, and stuff like that. And that really upset them. And there. And so, I had to take my apologetics hat off and go, oh, I'm sorry. So, okay, so that's part of the background. Plus, Sean has been attacked by a lot of people, and he has, and I can see why. So when I got there on Tuesday, I actually forgot he has two daughters. I just forgot, and I saw one, and I said, oh, I said, last time I was here, I just wanted to let you know, I'm sorry. I didn't take the apologetics hat off. You were just trying to say, thank you for me being here. And I should have just, you're welcome and stuff like that. And she goes, oh, well, thank you for saying sorry, and everything was fine. And then the other girl who asked the question later didn't know that I'd done that, and didn't know that I was, I'm not out to get Sean. I'm not out to get anybody. It's just, I'm a doctrinal purist, and let's go. So anyway, so Sean, during the show, I thought I was doing really well. And then she, the other daughter, brought up the issue of contradictions, and so I answered those, and it was rising. The tension was rising, and I'll just say that. Then she brought up my daughter Rachel, and did it in a disparaging way. Okay, and so that I just blew up at that point. I didn't cuss. I didn't say anything. Like call her names, and I never did. And I just said, I'm done. I'm not going to put up with that, and I walked out. And so went outside, and I'll tell you, I was livid. I was very angry. And so a friend of mine named Nathan was there with me. And Nathan, he's a great guy. He's from here, and we drove up together for all this, he and his wife. So, there's mayhem. Actually, when I left the room, people were arguing and yelling at each other, from what I understand. One person got up, this is what you guys do, and I don't want that. But anyway, so there's heated arguments, not heated an arguments necessarily, but it was tense in there. But I was outside, and I wasn't going back in. I said, I'm done, let's leave. I still had the lapel mic on, and it was feeding inside. And they heard me say, I'm not going back in there. I'm done, basically. And then they cut the mic off because someone said he's still out, but no big deal. Nathan came out after about 2 or 3 minutes. And I'm walking in circles, and I'm not the one driving. I got to wait for my people to get their stuff, get my bag out of there, the whole bit. It takes a bit to kind of do that. I'm just, you just don't use my daughter against me, And so Nathan, after about 4 or 5 minutes, I can't remember exactly, Nathan came out, and I'm calming down, and Nathan said, he goes, look, man, I'm going to give credit to where it's due. Nathan really did the right thing. He said, look, you need to talk to them, her name, I'm not going to say her name, realized what she did was wrong, and she's in there crying, and she's apologetic, and she wants to just confess it and ask forgiveness. And I was like, oh man, you know, she shouldn't have get. And Nathan said, Matt, you need to do this. You need to listen to me. You need to calm down, because it's not going to do anybody any good. And when he said that, I went, oh my goodness, he's right. And I immediately just said, you're right. And I was able to calm down because he said that. You know, I was coming down anyway, but she came out and she apologized. And she said, I'm so sorry. I should not have said that. I should not have done that. And it was hard for me because I was still angry. But I said, I forgive you. It's all right. We shook hands. And I said, it's okay. I said, it happens. Things like that happen. And I said, I understand. And we get talking. And I said to her, I said, I want to tell you something. And I said, I'm not trying to make you feel bad. Honestly, I'm not. I just want you to understand something. I said, people have been using my daughter against me for years. And it's just become a kind of a sensitive thing. And I said, I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I just want you to understand why I reacted that way. It's tough. And I already feel bad enough for what I said and did with my daughter. What, you know, a dad will always second guess himself. I said, she's where she's at. How much of it's because of me? You know, what am I doing? And the anguish that a father would feel, particularly a Christian father like this. And she said, oh, I see. Yeah, that makes sense. And she's really good about it. And I said, I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I just want you to understand, because she's not a parent, as I know. And so then, you know, it ended well. And at that point, and Sean came out and said, he said, look, man, because I'm really sorry. I hope that you'll come back on the show. And I said, I'll come back on the show. But now that I've thought about it, I don't know if I will. But I did say I would, so I'm kind of held to my word. But we'll talk about it. And so I don't know what's going to happen. I haven't talked to Sean since. It's only been a few days, not a big deal. And that's it, and stuff. And then the girl who said what she said found out during that outside time that I'd actually gone to her sister and said, hey, I'm sorry about the last time. I wasn't really trying to do this or that. You know, she didn't know that. She didn't know a lot of stuff. And then she felt even worse because she knew that I had, you know, just trying to be good with all of them. And then to be, so to speak, attacked like that, she really felt bad. And she apologized several times. And you know what? That's done. And I don't want it promoted because I don't want her to be injured. And I don't want, there's no need to bring her name up. There's no need to look what she did. You know what? Just leave it alone and just move forward. That's my view. And I'm a public figure. I'm used to getting attacked. I should have been prepared to react better. That's my issue. I got to work on that. I do. And but that's it. And you know, so that's it. That's the whole thing. Okay.
Well, that was pretty interesting. You did a good job with the rest of it. I am still flabbergasted at Sean McCraney's arguments through the whole show. I thought he would be more in line as Sola Scriptura than he is, because of the mere fact that he is an apologist against the Mormons. And to hear him say, well, doctrine doesn't matter. We need to embrace the love of Christ. We should accept all doctrines. That to me just,
that's really bad.
Yeah, that to me just floored me when he said that, because here's a guy that's well known for critiquing Mormon doctrine. And to hear him say that is just flabbergasting, you know? It's like, here's a guy that's just not consistent, where his theology is not consistent with his apologetic.
No, it's not. There's a lot of inconsistencies. And I pointed several of them out during our discussion. But I can only be so tough on the guy, otherwise he's going to shut down. And, you know, I want him to come to a better orthodox position and be used of God again. I'm one of the few guys that can talk to him, that's left over of any, not to toot my own horn, but of any import who will talk to him. And so, you know, the goal is to You know, it's the 99 sheep per lot, and you leave the 99, you go get the one. That kind of thing.
You know, Matt, when I first became a Christian in 2009, I saw a Sean McCraney interview with, I think it was Mormon Answers or Mormon Discussions. I forget now what the show was. But on that interview, he sounded like like an Orthodox Christian.
Yeah, he was.
But I haven't actually followed his apologetic pattern since. I was very interested in what he was saying back then. Then I kind of, he went off the radar for me. And only like now it's been brought up again, and I've been rechecking what he's been saying, and I'm going, wow, he's become more liberal than all those years ago.
Yeah, he still has a lot of Mormonism still in him. The idea of going by the Spirit, not by the Word of God. And we'll see what happens.
Well, isn't that what the Mormons teach? I mean,
Yes.
I used to be a Mormon, so I can represent them properly when I'm saying this. I read Moroni. This is what I would say if I was still a Mormon. I read Moroni 10. I followed the pray that the Book of Mormon is true, and I got this burning in the bosom feeling, and the burning in the bosom feeling was good, and it told me it was true. So that is what the Mormon. So that's exactly what he's doing. He may not realize that.
Yeah, you have a bit of a bandwidth issue. You'll be able to make out what you're saying, but you might want to turn your video off or something like that so the audio is better. Because your room's messy. That messes up with the waves, the Wi-Fi waves, the messy room.
Hey,
you may have to drop out and come back in.
Hold on. Is that better?
No, it's still choppy.
Little, yeah.
Yeah, the
By
audio is
the way,
really
it was
messy.
Mormon Stories, and back in February of 2010, Mormon Stories.
Let me try something here. I have my PlayStation on, so that may be causing some of the problems here.
Get an Xbox.
No, PlayStation, come on. What about permission for advertising for PlayStation?
Does anyone else have questions?
Well, Vincent, you were having a hangout on Revelation 3:14 last when I was in it.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe I'll ask Matt, what's your thought on the RK in Revelation 3:14? Because I was debating this. Was he Unitarian? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know what he was.
Some kind of weird. He's not Jehovah's Witness, but he's not. Yeah, I mean, I guess you can call him a Unitarian because that's the closest. He said something else, but
so I was defending the, in this case, the International Standard Version, the ISV's rendering of 3:14, and saying that Jesus is the faithful Amen, who is the originator of God's creation, not like how the King James puts it, the creation. He's the beginning of the creation of God. What's your thoughts on that RK word? And related to
it has a semantic domain, and one of the things it means is that thing which first came into being. But also, if you go to John 1:1, in the beginning, and that is the initiation of creation, and he was that in Revelation 3:14, the beginning of the creation of God. It doesn't say he's the first created thing of God, but he's the beginning of the creation. That arche, that source. That's, yeah, as you said, that's no problem.
Yes, and I actually made that connection, and I actually then realized the ramifications of his argument, because if RK is not the eternity past prior to, the beginning of the universe, then, and if RK therefore is a sequential pattern of time, then you have God lumped into a sequential pattern of time in John 1:1. And now you've hit heresy. And then I also noticed that the exegetical commentaries made a connection that you could connect it to Archon, which is ruler. So you could see it as the Amen faithful one who is the ruler of God's creation. That's a possible translation.
Yes. Yep. Of course, they're going to want to say that Jesus is created. And so what I'll do is I'll set them up. Because a lot of times, we could argue about this with them, and they're not going to believe it, because they're going to just say arche means beginning in the sense of he's the first created thing. That's what they're going to just go with. So you can give them arguments and say, well, it doesn't necessarily mean that. They don't care. So I set them up, and I'll say, so then Jesus was the first created thing? Yes. And then he created everything by him after that words? And they'll say yes. And they'll often quote, Colossians 1:16 and 17. And I'll say, okay, so let me get this straight. So what you're telling me then is that Jesus is the first created thing, and then he created all things afterwards. Yes. I say, okay, well then what do you do with Isaiah 44:24? Thus says Jehovah, your Redeemer, and the one who formed you from the womb. I, Jehovah, am the maker of all things, stretching out the heavens by myself and spreading out the earth all alone. I'll say, so
yeah,
how does that work? And then they're stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, to my surprise, which I never actually came across before, but because I'm using Logos software.
Okay.
And
me too.
So I'm using the Baker Exegetical Commentary by Grant Osborne, a really great commentary. And in the footnote, he says that the Amen title can be, he says here, on the basis of a Jewish midrash of Proverbs 8:22, where you could translate it as master workman, and therefore in this sense, Jesus was God's advisor in creation. So my question to him was, how can a mere creature be an advisor to an omniscient God?
Ooh. That'd be good.
I'll share the screen for you just to see where I'm reading.
Yeah.
What verse in Isaiah did you say, Matt? I'm gonna just make note of it.
Isaiah 44:24.
Yeah, that verse works with Jehovah Witnesses a lot as well.
There you go. You can see I'm sharing the screen now. I've highlighted the text.
I don't see your screen. Oh, there it is. Interesting. And that's Baker's exegetical commentary. What if I have that?
Yeah.
I have a lot of stuff, but I don't know. Cool.
I got an updated version of Logos, so Narwhal's pretty jealous of me right now.
I have version 7.
So do I.
I've still got the old version 3. It's still good.
Okay, version 6.
You guys
The
on
free
the
version.
accordance. Accordance is better.
Yeah, Baker. Yeah, I got to learn how to use the new version because it's too complicated. Things I used to literally have version 2 up and version 3 up in different windows, and I would swap back and forth between them on which one was faster and better for different things. But at any rate, yeah. Well, good for you with the commentary stuff on that Baker's exegetical commentary, huh?
Yeah, it's a really good series. Like I've got all the. It's not Baker commentary. It's the Baker exegetical commentary.
Yeah, I don't have it.
And I think this is it's got Darrell Bock for Luke and Acts. So really good.
Okay, very nice.
Yeah. Hold on. Let me mute here.
Wyatt, you need to fix your mic.
Yeah. Yeah, that. Anyway, I was looking at Thomas's screen there, and that's quite the setup that he has. He's got like several. Thomas, you there? Because I'm looking at your screen, dude. You got like 3 monitors that I can see, along with I don't know, like cords and electronics everywhere. Can you hear me?
Wow.
Yeah, you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
Yeah, I'm in
how's your-
cybersecurity, so I got a little bit of everything here.
I was about to say, how's your electric bill when you get it in? Because it must be high with all that stuff going.
Yeah, it's not too bad. Some of it's energy efficient, so I save a little bit there.
So you're in cybersecurity, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Oh, right on. Well,
So
Matt's
before,
probably know.
so before I was called by my parents, I did have a question. I do have a debate coming up on the 12th, November 12th, and I was wondering if you would like to help me prepare for that when it comes up.
What's your debate on?
I'm debating on presuppositional apologetics with a guy named Dave Foda.
And what's the debate title?
The debate title here. Let me bring up Robert Batty's website, which he's a guy who actually promoted this. He promotes a lot of my stuff. I call him my stalker. So here's the debate. Here's the debate thing. So that gives pretty much some of the details. One of the details is I have to introduce it within 6 minutes, develop a 2-minute opening statement, stuff like that. So
so what's the debate title?
presuppositionalism. The full title here is, hold on. Here it is: presuppositionalist ideas of things we can know and how we know them and how it applies to religion. That's the.
Can you write that out? I can't see it. Could write it out.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay. I found it.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, Wyatt, you, I guess you're more of the Clarkian bent for presuppositionalism. Is that correct?
Yeah, I incorporate Clarkian and Van Til. I'm basically a flexible apologist. I don't take one apologetic and say, okay, that's my apologetic. But and I'm sure Matt feels the same way. But
So I don't understand what the debate's about.
the debate is about basically debating the validity of presuppositional apologetics.
Well, it's valid in what sense? Is it logically valid or biblically valid?
Logically valid. I'm talking to an atheist, so
Oh, presuppositionalism. Well, presuppositionalism presupposes God, and then everything works out. Because you do that, everything fits in place. So he's saying that you can't do that? I would ask him, why would you presuppose you can't do that?
Right.
Because he's got to prove you can't. But to do that, he's got to use the laws of logic, but he can't account for the laws of logic.
Exactly. So I take a little bit different stance. Like I say, I take the axiom that the Bible alone is the Word of God written. From that, I do an implication of that is God's existence, and then I can account for my senses, reasoning.
Right.
Yeah. So that is the axiom that I start with, called the axiom of revelation.
Okay. Sounds to me like you'll be doing fine. Seriously.
Yeah. Well, I've never been in a formal debate.
Just know the reasons of presuppositionalism. Jesus even used them in John 4, the woman at the well. He says, you worship God on this mountain, but it really is over here. It's a sense of presuppositional. What do you presuppose? Of course, in the issue with the atheists, that's why I think debate titles are really important. So this is just that's a debate. Presuppositional ideas of what things we can know and how we can know them and how that applies to religion. That's not a debate to me. Does God exist? I will take the affirmative, you take the negative. Who's going to win that argument? That's a debate. But I don't see anything in here that would lead to a real debate. It just seems like a discussion. You're just discussing what ideas we can know and what we can't know, and how it applies to religion. Well, of course, it should apply to religion and everything else, but how what we know and can't know, because it's a epistemological issue. So then you have to get into various issues of knowledge. Rationalism, empiricism, and how you're going to know things, and then everyone has to have assumptions. I think that if you want to deny presuppositions, you're screwed, because an atheist cannot argue that there are no presuppositions. For example, he has to assume that he's the same person he was yesterday. He has to assume that the laws of logic are consistent. He has to assume that certain regularities exist in nature. And he can't prove these. He presupposes them without proof. So he is a presuppositionalist. If you're debating an atheist and he's warring against presuppositionalism, then all you got to do is listen carefully to what he presupposes and write them down as he's talking. And then say, well, you presuppose this and this and this and this and this, and yet you're arguing against presuppositions. Why would you do that? You're contradicting yourself. Things like that.
Now, I would take a bit different approach. I start with the axiom of revelation, because everyone has to start somewhere in their epistemology, and I start with the proposition that the Bible alone is the word of God. And if they reject it, then I'll just reject the axioms that they start with.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So
That's a Clarkian approach.
Yep.
Yeah, one thing that I was thinking while you guys were having this discussion, and I think I've seen this with other non-believers, be they atheist or otherwise, where they seem to take the concept of presuppositions and presuppositionalism and presuppositional apologetics and take all of those and kind of cram them together.
Right.
So that might be something else that would be good to make sure that there's an understanding that there's a difference between those things, because there's a difference between presuppositional apologetics and just presuppositions in general.
Right. Yep.
Because I think it's almost similar to, and for some odd reason, every single time I think of this, I always think of Aaron Ra when someone accuses him of being a faithful man, and he just gets all flustered and angry. Like to atheists, faith is a 4-letter word, even though it's not. I know it's 5, by the way, but it seems like, oh, faith, that's an awful thing. That's something bad. It's just trust. I mean, trust and faith are kind of synonyms, but they don't like the word. So they might have been introduced. Oh, okay, there's this presuppositionalist out there, and I don't like what he's doing there. The arguments that he's putting forth don't seem to jive with what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to speak out against that without examining what presuppositions are. Without, I don't know. They just seem to make an association and then kind of go run with it like a boilerplate or something.
Well, based on that, remember the Bonson Conference debate with Saiton Bruggencate and
oh yeah, with Jeff Durbin and Saiton Bruggencate, and I can't remember the other guy.
There was a statement made in there saying, "Well, I have confidence."
Yeah, confide. Yeah, yep.
Which means with faith.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I think that the I'm not exactly sure what to call it, aversion that they have to the word faith, I think is again something where they associate that word with the people that they say are insane, nuts, believe in fairy tales, whatever they want to call it. So I think that because they've associated it with that, it becomes like an untouchable thing. Like, oh, we can't have that. We can't have faith. We can't have presuppositions because,
I exposed in another debate I had where someone says that faith is a belief or is belief without evidence. Yeah. I'm saying if you're going to read that into what Christians say when they say faith, then they're really equivocating.
Well, yeah, and then that would also mean that once someone has evidence, like if God actually produced evidence to someone, that they then no longer had faith, that would make them an atheist now that they know that God exists?
Yeah, it's just crazy how they get into all this logical stuff when they claim to be when they claim to exclusivity on logic, when they get into all these logical fallacies.
Well, when the darkness hates the light, I think that it's going to try anything it can to try and kick the light away, even when the light's trying to reach over and say, "Hey, here's some light. Here's some light." They're going to use anything they can, be it illogical or not.
That was like
Also-
Matt's. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, some people become atheists when an atheist comes up to them and says, "Join our team, you have cookies."
Yeah, that what you said, Vincent, about the light. When I watched Matt and Alex talk. I watched a bit of the talk, and a lot of the comments on the side. If you guys saw that, I posted on the Bible Thumping Wingnut page. A lot of the guys weren't totally paying attention to what was being said, and they heard some of the stuff, but they would. It just was ridiculous. And I think Matt, you talked to somebody about this last week, last Sunday night.
Yeah, you mean how the atheists will only hear what they want to hear? They think that he's refuted me. He's
Right.
not. And
Right.
in fact, I got a new argument I want to run by you guys. I'm going to present with him, but a new way of developing that tag argument. But I see the flaw in what he's saying, and I'm going to show it to him. A lot of the atheists, of course, will not like it, but I'm going to show him that his logic doesn't work.
I think he had an issue with was it the dichotomy, and it was true, but it wasn't. He was like, it's a tautology, but everybody was like, oh no, it's fallacious. It's not fallacious. That's and they took that and ran with it for months, and they kept saying that. And
No, they still say that.
yeah, it's not fallacious.
It's
Yeah.
not a false dichotomy. It's an
It's not a
actual
false
dichotomy.
right. And it just blows my mind how they would even say that, because you just have to study the axiomatic laws of thought, the three of them, and you can't get to the law of non-contradiction and say that that's false. Like it's not false. He was just saying it's a tautology because it's correct by definition. But they were saying, oh no, Matt's wrong, and it's like it's not false. Like you need to listen to what's being said.
Well, yeah, and I think that again, like you were saying, or like you were, I guess, agreeing with what I was saying about the light and the dark. And I'm speaking in, of course, metaphorical, spiritual, darkness and light and whatnot. But I think that, like, for instance, if I come up with a dichotomy where I say the street light is either red or it is not red, that is all encompassing. It could be like, the street light color is red or it is not red. Not red covers all other things.
Exactly
It's
the issue.
extensive.
That's exactly the issue.
Now, it would be a false dichotomy if I were to say the street light is either red or it is green.
Right.
That is a false dichotomy because it's not extensive. It's not all inclusive to the other options.
Right.
I mean, with the original one too, you could have it be the street light is red or it is not red. Well, not red includes mauve. Not red includes purple. Not red includes other colors that are not even an option on the street light.
Right.
It's not toast either. I mean, just because you say God or not God or whatnot, or however well you want to go into logically laying that out in terms of syntax or whatnot, or whatever semantics you want to argue over that, it's still all inclusive. The not God part includes things that are not God. It's all other things. But again,
Right.
they just
That's
seem
exactly
to want to latch.
correct.
Yeah, and they just seem to want to latch onto anything they can to try and say, no, that's not the case.
Right.
You can't be right about anything because you're on the other side. You're the enemy. So we can't take anything you say. I'm going to knock that out of your hand. Out of hand.
Right.
I'm going to say, oh, we're not accept that out of hand just because we can't accept
Well,
that.
There's a lot going on. There's a lot of stuff behind the scenes of people trying to say, well, Alex has proven me wrong. He hasn't, and
Right.
I'm going to be writing some stuff. And our next encounter, I'm going to show him this is why I believe you're wrong. This is it. This is it. This is it. But I was talking to some guys. We were talking about this and some other stuff, and I came up with we kind of came up with, but I modified it, came up with this this approach. If you guys want, I have to run this transcendental argument by you in 5 steps.
Absolutely. Do you have like equation that you can type into the chat or as well, or?
Yeah. Okay, look. Number 1. All right. Either the transcendental nature of theism, God, or non-transcendent nature of atheism, not God, accounts for the laws of logic, right? So we would have, it is either T or N. Okay. And T is theism and N is not theism. So the laws of logic are transcendent, right? So L equals T. Okay, I was wrong. Better well said, Dennis. T is theism or non-theism. So T is theism. So L, laws of logic, are transcendent. I'm going to actually modify this so it makes more sense in the letters. The non-transcendent nature of atheism cannot account for the transcendent nature of the laws of logic. So therefore, not A. Therefore, there we go. Therefore, transcendent theism accounts for the transcendent laws of logic. So that would mean T. Therefore, theism is true. So it's either T or N. L equals T, not A, therefore T. And that's where we're at. I'm gonna be clarifying it, but these are some of the initial notes. I love the idea of adding in the transcendent nature of theism, which God, with a non-transcendent nature of atheism, because that's correct. That's a dichotomy, true dichotomy. Because atheism doesn't have transcendence. There aren't any transcendent qualities. Now, somebody may want to go into Platonic thought, and that's the only thing they could do, and we can get into nature. That's a whole other topic.
Can I devil's advocate here?
What?
I play devil's advocate here.
Sure.
Couldn't we say that there is a third option?
You're breaking up a little. So I want to hear you.
Yeah, I said, can't there be a quote-unquote third option, which is partially God? Which means that God used a secondary agent to himself to get the universe the way it is. So partially God.
Well, then I would say then, if it's then he would be the condition behind it. It'd still be that.
Mm-hmm.
And so either the transcendental nature of theism or non-transcendental accounts for the laws of logic, and that accounts for means you could say provides a necessary precondition.
Right. I'm just saying that would be one objection to that. But
I don't think it's a good objection. I mean, I hear you.
Okay.
Because if they were to say that there's a third party involved, so to speak, God uses a third party, well, then it's still God doing it to a secondary cause, and he's a necessary precondition.
Okay.
I've got 2 things to mention really quickly. One thing, the not A part, if you could expound on that a little bit, that'd be cool. And the second thing, which is more of a criticism, I guess, would be let's see here, either the transcendent nature of theism. So this is just going for general theism?
Yeah, for now, because what I would do if I was presenting this, say, ultimately, I'm only going to argue for the Christian God. But just to keep this simple, I say the theism I will only defend is the Christian theism, but I just leave theism here. And I could do either the transcendental nature of Christian theism or the non-transcendental nature of atheism. But then it opens up to, what about Hinduistic or Islamic theism? And then you get all these things. So that's why I left it at just theism, where God exists. Now, somebody say, well, define God. Then we got to get into these particulars. But see, the thing is, the basic idea to be shown here, and then it could be worked out and potential holes filled in. So what I noticed when I was talking to these guys, I said, wait a minute, you know what? The reason these other things don't work, there's other ideas and some stuff that have been raised against, and Alex, I really see the problem with Alex's thinking, but nevertheless, is the issue of transcendence. Because one guy said, well, toast or non-toast. Let's use Matt's argument. Toast or non-toast can account for the laws of logic. I say that's correct. It's either toast can or non-toast or something besides toast, because that's what the whole thing is. And so they would have a false dichotomy in toast or non-toast, but it's not a false dichotomy to say God or not God, because the non-toast can be anything else besides toast, where with God, it can be anything else besides God, but God by definition is all encompassing. So you see, working through these and trying to make these statements basically simple and logically true without being too expansive is problematic. I would have to add the expansions underneath each point, say A, B, C, D, with definitions for clarification. But then anytime you do something like that, then someone says, well, then there's this point, then there's that point, and some points, and they want to argue. But
one thing I'll mention is, and this may be an odd thought that I had, but the atheists may actually like this argument better simply because in this argument, they're being set in their own category, and then theism would be set into a completely different category. Where it's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, sure, we're completely different than theism. So yeah, the Hindus and stuff like that, they're not in our category; they're in your category. So it's they might like that,
right?
Better.
Either way, but let's say they did. I thought about that. Let's say they want to argue. Let's say, well, then they would argue for Islam. That would argue for this. Would argue for that. I'd say, well, we can talk about that later. I'm not going to say yes or no. We'll talk about it later. Because in Islam, God is not transcendental and consistent, and that's a whole other thing of the validity of Islam. It's another subdivision topic. But I'd say, okay, let's leave it at that. I'm not going to argue that for now, because the point is to show that their atheism is false.
Well, the question I would have if I was an atheist, you're arguing. It seems like you're saying that general theism is true by accounts for this argument, right?
Yeah, that's the logic in this argument. But as I said, I would let them know, ultimately, I'm only arguing for Christian theism.
Okay. So let's say you were just going to use this argument to say that, well, general theism may be true. A criticism I would have if I were an atheist is, okay, how do you know that this God cannot have logical, does not operate in logical contradictions, or does not have the ability in his nature to be illogical? We know that the Christian God cannot be illogical by nature.
I mean, he's saying we know the Christian God cannot be logical, or that's a commentary you're making?
That's a commentary I'm making, but the atheist could say, how do you know that God in his nature that this general theistic God cannot be illogical? It doesn't have it in his nature to be illogical.
I would say, are you trying to ask me to prove a negative?
I'm asking. Well, what I would be asking you is to show me
that he's not illogical, right?
Yeah, to show me that he's not illogical.
Well, the point is, I would say, so you're trying to have me prove a universal negative. So if I ask you to prove that there's no God, is that going to be okay for you? Because they're saying that they want me to prove a negative, so to speak. I understand what they're doing, but the principle is there on the table now. So then I can do the same thing with you, can't I? If they say no, then I might say, well, then why should I prove he's not illogical? If you're going to say, prove to me he's not this, I can say to you, as an atheist, prove it to me God does not exist. That's just one point. But the other thing is, I would say, and I've answered this question before, I'd say by definition, the God of Scripture, and I said, as I've said, I'm only arguing the God of Scripture ultimately. The God of Scripture cannot be self-refuting. He cannot violate his own character.
Right. I'm just saying there's some holes if you're going to be arguing for a
Yes, I
general
understand.
theistic God.
Yeah, I understand. But for now, that's where it's at. Okay, and the idea in this issue of atheism is to get something down that can be utilized generically, and the idea is to show here that the atheist worldview doesn't work, therefore God exists. Then it's the issue of, which is a whole other set of arguments. Good, which one's the right one? Once we've got them there, then they're open to discussing the other issue, because what they want to do is combine all kinds of stuff. I say one point at a time, I'm trying to show you that atheism doesn't work. And then say, now if you want to argue which one is the right one, let's do it. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then really quickly with the not A part, would that be not N?
It's been a while since I've looked at it. Let me see. Enter the transcendent nature of God, non-transcendent nature. So is either, I'm going to do it this way, either T, either transcendent or
It's not atheist.
non-transcendent. So either trans or non-transcendence. Okay. Laws of logic are transcendent. So logic is transcendent. Let me see, work it up here. Let's see, non-transcendent. Oh man, I can spell that right. Transcendent. There we go. Non-transcendent nature of atheism cannot account for the, so not atheism, not T. So it would be like this. It would be, let's see, right, get this down here. Put it together. Hold on. Let's see. Sorry, guys. Okay, here.
This is riveting. By the way, I reject the whole thing about me being a terrible driver.
Let's see if this makes sense. Okay, I think I got it here. So that it makes more sense, do this. Let's see, one, rewriting it kind of for simplicity. 4, okay, here. Okay, almost done. That way I can work with it. Then, ready, set. Here we go. Copy, paste. The smiley face is not transcendent. It's supposed to be an equal not. I'll just put the word not in there.
The smiley face is was predestined before time occurred.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. It was.
Smiley face makes the argument happy.
There we go.
That adds extra validity to it.
So here's a simplified form of it. You can see there.
By the way, the YouTube chat is probably going nuts right now as far as all the atheists go.
I just posted that they're still saying it's a false dichotomy, and I'm asking them to join in.
It's not a false dichotomy. Show why it's a false dichotomy.
I know. I keep.
Which issue?
Have to make room.
Come on. They can claim it, but let's see them do it.
I even gave them an example of a dichotomy.
Hey guys, I'll make room. Come on in if y'all listen, atheist. There's room right now.
Oh, and you misspelled non-transcendent.
Yeah,
there's a C in there.
Yeah.
Hey, atheist, there's one spot.
Yeah, your argument's invalid, Matt. You misspelled something.
Oh, here he is. Okay, Joe's in here now. Joe.
Hey, gang. How's it going?
How's it going?
Go ahead.
Hey.
Who is the person who left for me?
Coolest.
I want to thank him.
That was Vincent Lasson.
Cool. Thank you, Vincent. How's everyone doing?
Fine.
I am doing very well.
Wyatt, I think you need to restart. You're sounding robotic, man.
Yeah, that mic is gone.
Yeah, it's nice seeing you, Wyatt. I haven't talked in a bit. Unfortunately, I'm not one of the people. You guys were saying someone is arguing it's a false dichotomy.
Yeah, Brenda was saying that. I think.
Tag. Okay, yeah. I should let Brenda give that argument. Then.
Yeah, Brenda should be in here.
You mean Bob?
I mean, Brenda.
Bob?
I imagine it's
Brandon.
No, Brenda.
Yeah, Bob.
Brandon.
Brandon?
No, she's this girl that's in the live chat. But like, so what is your understanding of the false dichotomy issue that's brought up?
Who are you asking?
Who has the transcendental argument for God's existence in here?
I'm the one proposing it.
Okay. So like, I forget what Alex Malpass said. What I understand it is that you can't, the only way you can go and show that it's not a false dichotomy, it seems like you have to do some sort of evidential survey of all the other worldviews, right? That's what I understand the argument to be. But that comes into problems of circularity.
Right. So are you an atheist?
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you. Would you agree that it's either the case that God exists or it's not the case that God exists?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you agree that in either one of those options, only one, because they contradict each other, I would think just we're safe here, only one of them can account for or provide the necessary preconditions for the laws of logic?
Well, I think to get back to the point I just made, it's not just atheism versus the Christian theism that you're proposing.
Is
and
it true?
That's where the criticism of it being a false dichotomy comes in, right?
I understand. Is it the case that God exists or is it not the case that God exists?
Those are the two options between you and I, me being an atheist, right?
Okay. Is it true that either God exists or it's not the case that God exists?
I think it's true that God doesn't exist.
Okay. Is the statement true? It is either the case that God exists or it's not the case that God exists.
Yes.
Okay. So we have two options, correct? God and not God, correct? Now, we have the laws of logic, correct? Okay. So either God as an explanation, the necessary stuff behind what laws are, either God can be proposed as a sufficient explanation for those laws, or atheism can be proposed for a sufficient explanation, correct? Or the not God position, correct? Okay. So if we negate one, the other is verified.
Yeah.
Okay. So since atheism cannot provide the necessary preconditions that account for the laws of logic, therefore theism is verified. God exists. That's the argument.
Well, the thing, Oh yeah, I understand tag. The issue
Okay.
I think people bring up though is that saying not God doesn't just shut down everything but atheism. If you're talking about what's accounting for the laws of logic, you could still believe in other forms of theism and think that there are other ways you can account for logic. So
Well, then they could
it
have their
seems you do
day.
have to make like an inductive survey of all the different worldviews out there.
Okay.
And
They could have their
go ahead.
they could have their day if they wanted to get into the argument, and we could debate them. But the issue is God. We would define God as that universal absolute being who's always existed. Or it's not the case that a universal absolute being has always existed. Okay. In the case with the atheist, we have a true dichotomy here. What?
I'm really sorry you cut out for me.
Oh, so we either have that this absolute eternal being who's called God exists, or it's not the case that this absolute eternal being exists. That's true.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So either the absolute eternal being that is called God can account for the laws of logic, or it's not the case that the absolute eternal being can account for the laws of logic. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So would you agree with me, just curious, would you agree with me that in the category...
Go ahead, sorry. I'm lagging a bit.
Okay.
Let me refresh, and maybe I turned down my bandwidth.
Okay.
Actually, I think I'm okay. Continue.
Okay. So there's different ways of wording this, and what I'm finding with the atheist is that I'll word it one way with one atheist, and we can go 5 steps. I'll word it the same way with another atheist, we only go 2 steps. And there is no consistency among the atheists about really how to argue against tag. Now,
I agree.
when Alex and I have been discussing, unfortunately, most of the atheists don't understand what's going on, and they are only looking for any excuse they can find to deny this very powerful argument called tag. And so they'll just misrepresent what's being said. That's the case. I expect that. But nevertheless, you and I are here. I'm just trying to show you that if the premises are true and logical, then the criticism based on them can't be true. Because if the premises I'm giving and the conclusion make sense, and we're worded in a different way than what Alex has said, then Alex has the problem. I can tell you where the problem is. But the thing is that we either have, and that's why we say God is the condition that we must assume to account for the laws of logic, or not God, which is atheism, which is not God. And that atheism, and here's the key, that atheism includes the existence of the universe and dimensions and objects and things like that. Because when we say God, we're talking about the being who is God. And when we're talking about not God, we're talking about everything else besides him. When we say not God, we're not saying nothing. The way one atheist said, it's toast or not toast. And then not toast can do it. Well, not toast isn't anything. He says, see, Matt, it's not anything, is it? And he misses the point. This is the problem. When we say not toast, that's a category of everything besides toast. Now, what I appreciate about having discussions like this with atheists is it helps expose, I'll say it this way, linguistic vagaries in some of the points. So for example, when we say not toast, like I have an outline I'm looking at on another monitor, I'm making notes. This is not nothing, but includes God.
Is this is part of the objection about it being a false dichotomy?
Well, when he says it's a false dichotomy, it cannot be a false dichotomy to say that the thing and the negation of the thing.
The issue is that you can have it. I understand the argument to say, can you still have God exist, but just tag not work? Because I understand it being you have God as the ontology for the laws of logic, but you can think that tag doesn't work, but still hold to a theistic worldview.
I don't know if you can. I mean, people see when you say that. I'll be logical. Yes, you can hold to it. Can you hold to it logically? That's a different thing. People do illogical things and hold positions all the time.
Yeah.
So can you hold to it? Yeah, you can. Someone can hold to it. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It's just they can hold to it. So when he's talking about, here's what he's saying. When his view or his problem is, if I can recap it, it's like saying either P or not P.
Whose view?
Not Alex.
Okay.
Either P or not P. So not P. P. Okay, that makes sense. What he's saying.
Mm-hmm.
So, what he says is it's either P or not P. But if not P, therefore P. But he's saying if you say, this is what his argument is, it's either P or, I got my notes here, either P or not P. Not P, okay, therefore, here we go. I'll put it in here. Sorry, we'll get my notes here as we go.
Now, how does this pertain to the false dichotomy thing?
I'll show you what he was doing.
The specific thing that I mentioned right now.
I'm not sure it does. I'm not sure I'm understanding what your issue then, because if I'm explaining
No, well, my issue is that people do hold that tag doesn't work, but still hold theistic worldviews. So it's simply not.
Well, I don't care if they hold
Christian
to it.
theism versus atheism.
Well,
It's
Joe,
Christian theism versus a whole bunch of other options. What's up? You've been waiting for a bit, Wyatt.
Well,
yeah. When you I was gathering that your objection was that this argument only that Matt is proposing an argument for the Christian worldview, and you're asking how does he account for all the other worldviews that exist? Now the answer to that is he's arguing for a general theistic God, rather than a absolute absolute God of the Bible. It is true that he is a Christian, but that's what his argument for tag is entailing.
Just it's for general theism?
Yeah, general theism. This part of the argument is for general theism. It can expound on it after the argument's already done to get to the Christian God. Now, I don't necessarily agree with his assessment. My objection still stands that general theism has a lot of holes in it, but.
Okay, well, Meow, it seems to me, yeah, you can have Brenda come in. This is actually her argument. I actually wanted to argue about another thing, but it seems like, Matt, you could just continue. I'm not sure if you were really addressing the point I was making, but maybe
what was your
Brenda.
restate your point then.
That if it's the case that that other theists argue that they can reject tag but still be theists, then it seems to me possible for there being other worldviews that you have to contend with.
That only assumes if their rejection is rational.
Yeah, exactly. But it seems like it's possible that they can give a rational objection.
It's only possible if it's rational.
It's not really. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
It's only possible if it's rational. If you don't know what those arguments are with a rational, you can't say it is or is not rational. So what you're doing is offering a hypothetical.
I do know the arguments, though.
Well, you're only offering a hypothetical. What I'm talking about here, the issue of God either exists or it's not the case that God exists. Now, whatever form of God you want to say, we'll leave it at that for now. But I'm trying to get to a true dichotomy. A true dichotomy is a thing and the negation of the thing. God either exists or it's not the case that God exists. You agree that is a true dichotomy.
It seems to me like someone could just input another God, especially.
Is it true? Wait, no. Logic.
Matt, I'm sorry, I don't know if you could hear. Can you hear me? All right?
I can. Okay. It's just an issue of logic.
Yeah, I know. And usually when you try to explain that there's a false dichotomy, you try to, posit other ways of going about the argument, right? And so I'm trying to give you an example of theism, right? So there's other forms of theism. I mean, Muslim apologists also use tag. So there's clearly other worldviews you have to deal with.
Okay, are you ready? Look in the text.
Sure, what's up?
It's either A or not A. Is that a true dichotomy?
But did you understand the point I made
Yes,
about
I did. Yes, I did.
being
I've already.
atheist?
Yes, I did. I've already addressed it numerous times. I said if they want to have their time to discuss the validity of their position, that's another topic, another time.
I don't see how that undermines the claim that it's a false dichotomy then, because you're apparently acknowledging that there are other ways to go about it.
No, I'm saying I'm acknowledging that there are others who claim it. A claim doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah, but it seems to me like you're saying I have to give the argument in order to prove my point, but you don't want me to give the argument.
We can't get past this simple logic of what a true dichotomy is. I'm trying to get you, as I often do with atheists, to simply understand what a true dichotomy is. The thing and the negation of the thing. It's either A or it's not A. Is that a true dichotomy?
Yes, I understand the concept, but I'm objecting to it, and I gave an argument.
So you mean A or not A is not a true dichotomy?
No, I'm objecting to your argument of tag.
Okay, is A or not A a true dichotomy?
I understand what a true dichotomy is. This is like me explaining modus tollens and saying that there's an argument against God for modus tollens, and then just saying over and over again, do you understand what modus tollens is?
Okay, I just simply asked about the statement there. That's all I did.
Okay, no problem.
All right, and often I find that atheists want to jump all over the place. I say one step at a time. Now, when we get to the issue of God or not God, then what the atheists do is say, which God? And I'm going to say, just simply stick with God or not God, because we're replacing the word God with the word A. Is it still?
Why don't we get Brendan in? Because we have an opening.
Is it still then a logical, a true dichotomy?
I didn't hear you because he said, why don't,
okay.
What was the last thing?
If we do, it's either A or not A is a true dichotomy.
Yeah.
Then is it also a true dichotomy to say this? Okay, put them both in there. You see, it's either A or not A. It is either God or not God. It's still a true dichotomy.
Yeah.
If you're to say, well, what kind of God? I'm going to say, what kind of A?
But that wasn't my objection. If someone's making that objection and this is your response to it, that's interesting, but it's not the objection I made.
Okay. What is the objection you're making?
I told you that you can affirm other ontological sources, or that logic doesn't even have an ontology, be a theist or have another worldview, and reject tag.
Okay.
So you have to deal with multiple other worldviews that could give a sufficient account for the laws of logic.
Yeah, but
so it's a false dichotomy.
But you as an atheist already reject all those things. All those
Sure.
other things. So we're addressing so we're in agreement of most of the not God category that Matt is talking about. So you only have one worldview. You only hold to one worldview in that not God category. You reject all the other ones. So he's only addressing your specific view because you already reject all those other views.
Rocco, I get the point you're making, but this is the issue, is that I'm not aware of there being some random theistic view that you and I, everyone in this room, hasn't heard before. What if that random theistic view is it just makes so much sense? That can account for the laws of logic, like nothing. Well, I'm not aware of that.
Why don't you present it?
The only way you can be aware of that is by at least attempting some sort of inductive survey of all the worldviews out there. But the problem is that will lead eventually to some circular logic, which is a problem.
Well, the question is the argument could be posed this way: either it's God or it's something other than God that can account for the transcendentals.
Not just the laws of logic, just anything that's transcendental.
Well, Joe, just to give the scientific balance of that, Lawrence Krauss is actually asked that very question by his own peers. How can you have dynamics without time? And so one of his colleagues at a recent, well, one of his colleagues at a recent, when Lawrence Krauss gave his lecture on the universe from nothing, they actually said, look, the mathematics that you propose by definition means that you must have a pre-existent entity to account for dynamics without time. And so he obviously went into Hamiltonian mathematics, which again is a moot point, because again, you need something to cause whatever that happens.
No, I mean, I don't agree with Lawrence. I'm not familiar with his arguments. I think he's a poor arguer, and I'm not interested in. Like, I imagine the criticisms of his arguments about time were.
Well, actually, correct. I affirm his model. His model
oh,
is brilliant.
Really? Yeah. I just don't like, the philosophical arguments for first cause. I think those are more interesting.
Well, but, I'm a scientist, so I think Lawrence Krauss's model affirms the Christian God.
Yeah. No, I mean, there are a lot of people who hold the view that it's a testament to God's like perfection, the uniformity of nature, that kind of stuff. Yeah. No,
not specifically about. I'm talking about the argument about like virtual particles and how they can, the Lamb shift and how they can come out of nothing. And Lawrence Krauss argues that you don't need a God for that, but he doesn't realize, and a lot of other mathematicians on the panel, he doesn't realize that his mathematics requires an entity, quote unquote, in order to bring about this universe. And so it's his own Achilles heel.
Mm. I'm not familiar with the mathematics that he utilizes.
I formulated some clips. I'll send you the clips in PM.
Solo, it seems like I didn't mean to make things complicated for you guys. Is there anything that I'm saying that you would like me to elaborate on, Kat, or?
Why don't we get Brenda to talk to Matt?
Okay, sure. Well, just let me know if there's anything that you would want me to elaborate on, and I'm down.
Well, Matt Slick's argument is basically, well, I understand why you would think it would be a false dichotomy, either God or not God. But I would word it this way. Either God or something other than God can account for the transcendentals. And I think that's what Matt is arguing right here. Matt can tell me I'm wrong if he wants, but
no, that's what I'm arguing. Either God or something besides God. With the see, this tag argument is in the context. A lot of people forget this. The context of dealing with atheists.
So, do we want to clear the air?
Sure.
My name is Brenda. It's my legal name. It's been my legal name since 1993. I would like it very much if you would use my name.
When were you born?
1957.
So you were born as a male?
I guess so. I don't know if you want to get in. I don't know if you want to get into this. This seems to be a side discussion. If you want to discuss transgenderism, you can simply look up the science on this. The science is pretty clear. The brains of transgendered individuals resemble the brains of the gender they identify with.
Yeah, and studies that show that behavior can actually restructure the brain. So if you can behave in a certain way, you can actually get the brain to be structured in that way. So the science isn't all that reliable as far as causation.
They account for that, and it's actually not true that behavior.
I don't buy that for a second. Sorry, I don't.
Oh, you're just wrong. Neurobiologists.
You know what? You're just wrong.
Have verified. Yeah,
you're just wrong. Okay, Bob. I'm not going with that. Sorry, buddy. I'm not doing it.
But I
look up Robert Sapolsky at the University of Stanford, University of California at Stanford. Look up his lectures. Apparently, I frighten Matt a great deal Why is he afraid of me?
No, he just doesn't put up with this nonsense.
I think
Well,
I think I frighten him.
Well,
No,
what you just
has nothing to do with fear at all.
He's scared. No, I think he is. I think he's scared.
No, he's not scared. He just doesn't want to put up with this crap.
What establishes that someone is male or female in terms of gender?
That would be genetics.
Uh-huh.
Can we?
You
Can we-
guys object to people like identifying as male, irrespective of like the certain like sexual organs that they possess, right? That's the problem. It's what you were born with.
Well,
That's what you are.
Male and female are sex terms, like they're terms of sex, not gender.
That's the problem.
Right,
It's what
right,
you were
yes.
born with.
Well, male,
What about people who are born with ambiguous genitalia?
like
Well, just my issue with it is that it seems to me like that's the problem.
Right.
You guys believe in a God who's non-physical.
What about people who are born with
Wants to be referred to as a male, but he doesn't have any sexual organs to refer to, right? I mean, like, he's non-physical. So why is, I mean, it seems to me like if it's good enough for God, right, it should be good. I mean, I don't see the problem.
Because God is a spirit, not a physical being as we are, in that sense.
No, perhaps my spirit is female then.
Well, the question.
It's hard to hear you, Rocco.
What's that?
It was hard to hear you. Maybe if you get closer to your mic.
I'm as close to my mic as I possibly can be.
Okay. Hold on,
Well, the objection I would have to Brenda when she said that, well, my brain is a female. Well, my brain resembles a female brain. Therefore, I'm logically justified in calling myself a female. That commits a fallacy of asserting the consequent.
No.
Yes, it does.
Things that are like things can be called, you know, if this thing is like this other thing, then we can group it in with those things.
Well, the fact, here's a fact for everyone, because you're not going anywhere with this discussion.
No.
We were all once female in the womb of your mothers.
That's true.
Hey, I'm going to head out. It was nice talking to all of you.
All right, see you, Joe.
Good night.
This topic doesn't particularly interest me, and I don't know if you really want to pursue it.
So with Brenda and Keith Moore, he's a famous geneticist. He's 90 years old now, and he's written. I have his book, The Human Development, or the Developing Human, 9th edition now. He does argue that, and he does quite well, that men who psychologically identify as women, it could be due to a certain form of brain chemistry during the early developments of the fetus, because since we are all female initially, when the penis starts to develop, the hardwiring of the brain may still occupy a female-like thought pattern. And so maybe that's why Brenda thinks he's a female. It's a he first, right? You're a he.
But if that is the case, if I began as female and then in vivo as a fetus developed.
Yeah, but I also began as a female,
developed partially.
Yeah, but I also developed as a female, but I identify as a male. So you do have sexual differentiation. It could be that
your development
it could
took
be
a different
the
path.
way your brain formed was because, and hence that's the reason why I'm thinking of it.
No, that's not my choice though. That was not my choice. I didn't make a choice to develop differently than you did in the womb.
None of us have
No, it wasn't your choice.
What we end up as.
That was pure genetics.
Yeah.
That wouldn't explain men who or women who want to be men. Your example that you gave.
That in that case, it's due to the hormonal environment or the developmental environment. No, I don't actually know a great deal about it. I was more interested in discussing with Matt his argument and why it's not valid. And he doesn't seem to really even understand that his argument is valid, and shifting the words around isn't going to make it more valid.
What is your argument against Matt, if I may ask?
That Alex has definitively destroyed it.
No, you said we got to discuss
that's an argument from authority. That's
No,
not,
that's not.
I'm
What did
appealing.
Brenda say? I didn't catch that.
I said that Alex has definitively shown that the argument as proposed by Matt
How do you show it?
is not a valid argument.
How do you show it?
In a couple of Hangouts, this is a matter of record. I'm not going to go through 4 hours of
Well, are you
of
just gonna
video.
come? Are you just gonna come in here and just say, "Well, Alex defeated it," and that's your only point, or you can
It's because he proposes a false dichotomy.
Okay, then you can explain to us why it's a false dichotomy rather than just
How
saying,
is it a
well,
false dichotomy?
Yeah.
I mean, if you just want to say
so
that,
so let's restate Matt Slick's argument then. Matt Slick's argument is that either God can account for the laws of logic, or how does he put it?
Or not God can account for it.
You don't know the argument?
I'm asking for you.
No.
I'm asking for your input. I'm asking for your input so that we get the words right, that you agree to them.
Either God can account for
The laws of logic or not, and this is a false dichotomy. Either P can do X or not P can do X is a false dichotomy.
How is it a false dichotomy?
That's not a proper representation of the of the.
That's why I wanted you to consent to it first.
Okay, I'm going to moderate this.
You now deny that his argument is either God or not God can account for the laws of logic. Is that
hold on? No. What he's saying is, hold on. What he's saying is either God can account for laws of logic, or something other than God can account for laws of logic.
So how would I put that in syllogistic form? Either P can account for the laws of logic, or Q can account for the laws of logic?
Either P can account for laws of logic, or something other than P can account for laws of logic.
Let's call that Q. Let's call that Q.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
would be a proper dichotomy.
What's your so that's what Matt is saying, and Matt
That's
affirmed.
not what he says.
Yes, that is.
He says either
Yes,
P or not P. And
No,
that
when
is
I
a
mean-
false dichotomy.
When Joe was in the hangout, I said either P or something other than P can account for laws of logic, and I asked Matt, is that a proper
That's not Matt's argument in his
Yes, it
discussions
is.
with Alex. It is absolutely
Yes.
false. You're
No,
misrepresenting. You're
no, I'm
providing
not.
false witness.
No, I'm not.
What did Matt say? So what did Matt say?
His argument has been either P can account for the laws of logic or not P.
Yeah,
That
but
has
isn't
been
Q
it.
not P?
Wait, you accused me
No.
of lying. Wait, you accused me of lying. I asked Matt in this hangout if what I was saying was a proper representation of his argument. Either P can account for laws of logic, or something other than P can account for laws of logic. And he said, yes, that is basically his argument. So are you going to still accuse me of being a liar?
Matt's argument with Alex Malpass is a matter of record. We can refer to that, and you can see that he did in fact say something else.
Hang on a second.
Well, it's not a matter. It's not a matter of record.
Wait. I want to ask Brenda a question. 1 second. So isn't Q not P?
It depends. And there are different types of dichotomies. There can be an exhaustive dichotomy or not necessarily an exhaustive dichotomy.
Okay, so is Q an exhaustive dichotomy in relation to P?
I don't know. It's not my argument, is it?
Yeah, but you affirm the logic or the logical nature of the argument.
The
by
basis
defining
of,
it as-
the basis of the objection from atheists is that it is not exhaustive to say that either the Christian God or atheism can account for the laws of logic. The complaint is that it's not exhaustive of all the possibilities.
Well, that's not what Matt said. Matt is appealing to a general theistic God, not the Christian God.
Because it might be the case that neither God nor not God can account for the laws of God object. It might be the case that both. It might be the case that both God and not God can account for the laws of
Brenda,
logic.
How does that work?
That's contradictory.
They can both be true.
Anyway,
No, they cannot.
Hold
It's
on.
possible. Sure.
Hold on, Brenda. I put over in the chat exactly what Matt typed out earlier in the Hangout, which you wouldn't have been able to see because you weren't in here. But this is exactly what he said.
Oh, this is his new reformulated version. I am discussing the past Hangouts with Alex Malpass.
That's pretty much the same thing he did. He's been saying.
I haven't had a chance to really analyze it, but this is different. His past arguments were based on were quite different. It was either P or not P.
How is that
not P or not P?
Either
not P, therefore P.
Either God exists.
Yeah, not a dichotomy.
You're saying both, but then you're saying you're still appealing to God, even when you say it's both, even when you're appealing to another causal agent, you're still affirming God.
So the gist of it was with Alex Malpass in the last Hangout they had was either P or not P, not P, therefore P, and the objection is that this is tautological and it doesn't really say anything. You're simply restating the premise.
But you made a claim.
Technically, it's a valid argument. It just doesn't do anything. It just simply restates the premise.
Okay, because you just said it was invalid. That's what we were trying to. It's a tautology. That's what we're saying from the jump.
It sort of depends a little bit. You can't conclude from simply stating P that P.
Oh, okay.
I don't think that's. You can't just simply say, well, God can explain it because God can explain it. That's the objection.
Well, the question is, what do you propose for your not P argument?
For my not P argument, I don't understand.
Or you're saying that something other than P can account for the laws of logic, right?
Oh, okay. Well, if we're considering just the arguments themselves, or my own personal response, I've been discussing it in abstract up till now, and explaining what the problems were. But my own response to the laws of logic is simply that we have the axioms of logic are self-evident. A priori.
Well, I would say that God is
they're self-evident a priori facts.
And God is self-evident.
Exactly.
Well, you can say that, but people don't always accept it.
So, does the acceptance or rejection of a subjective acceptance or rejection distract from the truth of the self-evident God?
Well, if the onus is to account for the laws of logic, I have provided an account. They are self-evident, axiomatic, a priori truths.
Would you reject God as a self-evident truth?
I don't see that God is self-evident.
Then I reject your assertion that the laws of logic are self-evident.
That's okay. It's a free country. You can do that. That's fine. But I have given an account for the laws of logic.
No, you have not. No, you have not.
No, you haven't. You just said logic
They're self-evident.
itself.
Yeah, you give an account, and it's just not a justification. Because I can say anything about anything.
It isn't a justification.
It's just not a justification.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it is. They're a priori. They're a priori truths.
You have
But
to.
you
Hold on.
They're self-evident, self-attesting
Then you have to prove that if you can justify it. If you can justify it, you can prove that they're
No,
a
you can't
priori.
prove that something is
And it's not
self-attesting.
justified.
Yeah,
But you
You can't-
reject it.
It's not,
but
it's not
you
just. You're just assuming. You're assuming that
Circle logic.
yeah, that's fine. That's okay.
Even no, but even
That's how logic works.
God being
That's how logic works. You know, of course, that there's really
Okay.
no such thing
But-
as the laws of logic, right? I mean, you
So
do
there
know
is-
that correctly, right?
Laws
There's no
of
such
logic.
thing.
Laws of logic
no
don't
such thing.
exist. Laws of logic do not exist. Yet they are self-evident,
there-
people.
There's
They're
no
self-evident.
there's no such thing as the laws of logic. There's such a thing as the laws of thought, but there are no laws of logic. There are, in fact, how many logics
there
are
are
there?
laws of
How many
logic.
kinds of logic exist?
well, yes, there are laws of logic.
There are multiple laws of logic.
Then then
How many
you're just contradicting yourself.
how many kinds of logic exist?
I see where Brenda's going with this, guys. Yeah, because that's
There-
why I posted on the side. We have
Do you know?
axiom.
Yeah.
Wait.
There are over. I checked this out. I searched on Wolfram Alpha, which, do you know? You're familiar with Wolfram Alpha?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I checked
Very
there.
familiar. with
There's over
Wolfram.
3,000. There are over 3,000 formal systems. There are 3,000 types of logic, quote unquote
3,000.
logic. All of them have different axiomatic
you
starting
didn't-
points.
but
There's
still, when you
3,000.
said
So, excuse me. Go ahead.
when you said that
3,000 that don't exist.
exactly.
No,
3,000
I'm
don't
saying there's
exist.
no laws of logic in the sense that there are just these three laws, and that any logic must obey them. They don't. Many forms of logic do not accept other axioms that other forms of logic accept.
Well,
Like the
going
axiom of choice, and some do away with the law of the excluded. They don't deny the law of the excluded middle, but they simply don't make use of it.
Well, going back to what you said earlier, that they're axiomatic, I would just pose that the axiom that the God of the Bible exists, you rejected. So if we're going to be logically consistent, I'm going to reject your axiom
No, you can't.
that the laws of logic exist, and we're not going to get anywhere with this discussion unless we accept each other's axioms for internal critique.
So when you say that the laws of a thought, the law of identity and the law of contradiction don't exist, did you actually mean that? Did the words that you spoke actually mean anything?
Well, they're dependent on God. That's what I'm saying.
Well, you presuppose that God exists. God is supposed
Well,
to be
You're presupposing logic.
These are principles. These are principles. They're not an entity.
Well, you're presupposing the laws of logic.
Yeah, that's
to make
fine.
your argument.
Yeah,
To make
that's
your
okay.
argument.
That's how math is done, honey.
Well, that's
That's how it's done.
that's the same thing. That's the
No,
same
it's not the same thing.
Yes,
It's
yes,
not
it
the
is.
same thing.
Yes, it is.
These are axioms. God is not an axiom. He's
How do you
an
know?
entity. He's an entity.
How do you
How
know
do you
that?
know that God's not an axiom?
How do you know that?
He's an entity. How do you know that? How do you know that? How do you know that?
Okay,
That's
kick you off.
That's a perfectly fine. Keep saying that. How we need to ask you, how do you know that? Because we're talking about epistemology here, and you're just assuming things.
Yeah, well, if I assume the axiom that the God of the Bible exists, then you should accept that for internal critique, and I'll accept your axiomatic laws of logic for internal critique.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
So
do the laws of thought reflect God's thinking, or can God create the laws as He wishes? Can He violate the laws of logic?
Well, he can't by nature because his nature is logical and he cannot violate his nature.
That's begging the question.
How does that?
Oh.
But the laws of logic don't. But on your view, the laws of logic don't exist, and you just stated that.
I
So-
accepted for internal critique, as you suggested that I do.
Okay, so
And that's
And I
begging,
accept
and
God
that's
as an
begging,
internal critique.
begging the question then. Can God create a square triangle? Can he create a round circle, a round square?
no, he cannot because it's
No,
not
he
his
cannot.
nature to do so.
How you don't know his nature? You're just assuming
Yeah, we
his
do.
nature. You're caught into yet
No.
another infinite regress.
Hold on. I know the nature of God because he revealed his nature to me in the Bible.
Are you presupposing that he revealed it to you?
Wait, when did we get
Well,
away
I
from
know-
talking about the Christian God, the triune God?
Yeah, we're talking about a God who has revealed himself in Scripture. So he revealed himself, and he revealed himself and his attributes in the Bible.
And
You could be mistaken.
No, because God doesn't lie.
But you
How do you
accepted
know?
my axiom. You
Because he is
accepted my
truth.
axiom
How do you
of
know?
a God. You've
the
accepted
Bible
my
revealed it.
axiom. You accepted my axiom that the Bible exists, and this God is a God who revealed himself and his attributes in the Bible. So are you going to go back and reject that the God of the Bible exists, and that my axiom that the God of the Bible exists? Then we're right back to where we started from.
If I accept his existence, that doesn't mean I necessarily know his nature. You claim to know not only that he exists, but you claim to know his nature. You claim to know that his nature is logic.
That's a part of his axiom.
so we could say that you said
So you just
wait. You said we could say that you said your axiom was that the laws of logic exist, but we could say, okay, well, you just don't know them. You can't apply them correctly. You can't. That's exactly what you just did. That's part of the axiom that Wyatt gave.
I'm not quite following that.
Because you're saying that we can't know his nature, we might be mistaken. Well, we could just say, oh, you might be mistaken about your axiom. But
Well, you have the additional problem of if you accept that God exists, then you're still caught in the horns of the dilemma of whether or not the laws of logic reflect his nature because they are from God, or whether or not God can supervene he created the laws of logic and could have created them otherwise.
Well, he by nature is logical. God revealed his nature in the
But
Bible.
you don't know that.
Yes, I do. That's part of
You
my.
presume that you're adding presumptions on.
Well, you don't know that the laws of logic exist.
We're doing the internal critique thingy.
Well, you're saying that I don't know that I don't know something.
Well,
that's
how do you know then? How do you know his nature?
He revealed himself in the Bible. That's my axiom.
So we seem to be multiplying axioms.
He revealed himself.
And how do you know? How do you know that he revealed himself to you in the Bible?
How do you?
We're talking about the God of the Bible, and if the God of the Bible is my axiom, then it follows that he revealed himself and his attributes in the Bible. That's my axiom. So how do you know that the laws of logic exist? Because you seem to be rejecting my axiom.
Well, that's because you just seem to be conjuring this up out of thin air. You're just multiplying entities wantonly, you know.
No, I'm not. I'm not multiplying entities.
Yeah. You just keep begging the question. You keep assuming and presupposing.
No, it's pretty clear.
Without explanation.
Look, Brenda. The Bible is pretty clear on the attributes of God. So when he's saying that the Bible and God are his axioms, you're starting to question the attributes that are revealed in the Bible, basically attacking his axiom. So therefore, that's why we're saying, well, how do you know the laws of non-contradiction are true and self-evident? Well, how do you know those are part of logic? How do you know that? So you're actually denying why it's an R axiom when you agreed earlier to work within our axioms. So that's the problem.
I accepted that to do internal critique, I accepted that God was the justification for
We're
the
talking
laws
about
of thought.
God of the Bible, as the Bible
we can't-
describes God
I'm
and his
sorry.
attributes. Because God has attributes that are revealed in Scripture. So that's the axiom. So those attributes that are found in Scripture defines who God is and is part of his attributes. And if you're going to accept our axiom of as God the starting point, you also have to accept all those attributes that are part of God. But you keep questioning the attributes of God.
Because you keep multiplying axioms.
It's not a
Okay.
multiplication. That's what I'm trying to get to you. Go ahead.
Well, the first one was that God accounts for the laws of logic. But then you say, when I question about whether or not God could create the laws of logic other than what they are, then you say, well, it's his part of his nature. And then I ask, how do you know his nature? It's because it's revealed in the Bible. These are additional things that you're piling on top of the initial one, which was simply that God was counted for the laws of logic.
Yeah, because God has attributes all the time. He doesn't just not have attributes when we say the word God. When we say God, we're including those attributes that are revealed in Scripture.
And so this is what I mean by you're just conjuring up a whole world by presuming it.
No, we're not. We're not. We're talking about the God and the God that has revealed himself in Scripture. You seem to be.
But you could be wrong.
Well, you could be wrong too about the laws of logic.
We could say.
Yeah, I think in good case we are, because there are many different types of logic, and it turns out, for instance, that classical logic does not fully explain the behavior of quantum mechanics, and there are many other types of logic that our mathematicians have explored simply out of curiosity, that behave differently. There's fuzzy logic and there's Bayesian statistical logic. There are different types of reasoning.
But isn't the mathematics behind quantum mechanics in itself that you need the laws of logic in operation for the mathematics to operate in quantum mechanics?
I would imagine, but they do show a world that does not operate in the way that classical.
Yeah, but that's because we are beings limited to a certain dimensional framework. Again, mathematics that operate beyond 10 dimensions is perfectly reasonable in the laws of logic.
Yeah, I'm not really qualified to comment deeply on quantum mechanics. I'm simply aware that there is such a thing as quantum logic, and it does in fact conflict with classical logic, and it is created as a response to quantum mechanics and its inconsistencies with our classical understanding.
Yeah, but the classical laws of logic are, well, you know the laws of logic, right? The laws of thought.
Yeah, the laws of thought. Basically, three axioms.
So
nobody. When you take logic, this stuff doesn't come up. This is apologetics. Nobody else talks about this stuff. If you take logic, then you're introduced to several axioms and formal systems. I mean, this isn't. Nobody else talks about this stuff.
Yeah, but I'm saying, as a physicist, I don't see any contradictions between what's been classically known as the laws of logic, because all they become are nuanced in this case in quantum mechanics. And the irony is that it's the same mathematical axioms, the way mathematics works and the way mathematics operate. There are no contradictory mathematics when you start getting into quantum mechanics. It's the exact same mathematics, obviously ordered in a different way, to now explain this new phenomenon?
I guess I don't know. I can't say. It's not something I feel like I have a great deal of knowledge about.
Because, and here's the thing, if there was a contradiction, then like a genuine contradiction, then your computer won't work. Because your computer is based on quantum mechanical instruction sets.
It's not the logic of the gates is not. The operation of the transistors is. But computers do not employ quantum logic. They employ classical Boolean logic. But in order to cram that many transistors and to get them to work, that
I'm trying to differentiate between qubits and the silicon chipset instruction set and things like that.
I mean, at the logic level of how it works, it's Boolean, and that's pretty straightforward.
Well, I mean, we could represent Boolean in just the axiomatic laws of thought. It'd be like zeros, ones, and we have De Morgan's law, and we have all types of different.
So what kind of work is it that you're expecting these laws of logic to do? What is it that they do that you seem to wish to refer to them all the time?
A more deeper question would be, how did they originate?
Right. Well, and I just wanted to ask, I wanted to ask Brenda a quick question.
Well, I think they're abstracted from experience myself.
Because Brenda, you said it was valid. You said, because what we were talking about the whole time, the P or not P, is the law of excluded middle, which I hope I'm saying this right. It is a true dichotomy, but it has to be true because it's axiomatic. So it is tautological, but that doesn't mean it's invalid, because you were saying that it's invalid, and that's what.
Yeah, it can be, certainly. It could be the case, either P or Q can do Y. Is that right?
No, I'm talking P or not P, because that's the law of excluded middle. It's a disjunctive syllogism with a premise and the negation of the premise.
Well, it could be the case that neither P nor not P or not P can account for the laws of logic. But as I said, it could be the case that both P and not P can account for the laws of logic. It could be either P or Q can do Y. It could be that Y is something that can't be done.
But that's a violation of the law of non-contradiction.
No,
Exactly.
not really.
Exactly.
Not really.
What do you mean, not really?
It may be that there simply is no accounting for the laws of logic.
Okay. I've had many conversations with Brenda about the fundamental basic laws of logic. And if you're expecting to have a coherent conversation about the law of identity, the law of non-contradiction, the law of excluded middle with Brenda, you're wasting your time, because all Brenda does is come back with non sequiturs and statements that muddy the waters. That's why there will be no productive conversation with Brenda about, for example, the law of non-contradiction.
I think that's pretty self-evident.
We're discovering that right now.
I think it's pretty evident with the law of identity.
Yeah, all you have to do is ask Brenda: do you employ the law of non-contradiction when you reason?
Sure, of course I do.
Okay, is the law of non-contradiction absolute and universal?
It's an axiom that is self-evident.
I didn't ask you if it was an axiom. I said, is it true at all times and all places?
You're asking for an a posteriori justification for an a priori axiom.
Notice everybody that I asked a very simple, clear, and circumspect question, and all I got was gobbledygook back.
That's not gobbledygook. The words actually.
Brenda, you do it every time you converse on the subject. So I'll ask you one more time, and I'll make it clear to everybody in the room. Is the law of non-contradiction true at all times and places?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Okay. How are you able to determine that that is the case?
You're asking for an a posteriori justification.
I'm not interested in nomenclature.
Truth.
I am not interested in nomenclature or you throwing down technical terms. How were you able to determine?
But you know what those
words mean? The law of
mean.
non-contradiction. I'd like to finish my statement. When I ask you this very simple and clear question, I would like the response to be nomenclature free so that we don't muddy the waters. So, how are you able to determine that the law of non-contradiction is true at all times and all places?
You, Dawkins, know what the word a posteriori means.
I am not interested in nomenclature. Please give it to me that where
know.
a ninth grader could understand the answer.
Your question is malformed because
No, it's
you're
not
asking,
malformed. It is not malformed. You see, this is why I get irritated with you and why I'm irritated right now. I asked you a question that is simple and clear. It is not a malformed question, and you are calling it a malformed question because you want to dodge the question. Here's the question again. Is the law of non-contradiction true in all times and all places? And you responded to me that you said it seems to be. And I said, good. How are you able to determine that the law of non-contradiction holds at all times and all places? Please give me an answer that is nomenclature free.
Because it is self-evident and self-attesting.
Okay, good. How is it self-evident halfway across the universe?
It simply is.
No, I didn't ask you. Well, how were you able to determine that?
It's a self-attesting fact.
How is it self-attesting? It is not a personal being that can communicate. So how are you able to determine that halfway across the universe, the law of non-contradiction always holds?
Asking me for a justification of the laws of logic, my response is that they are self-evident, a priori truths.
You're repeating yourself now. I heard your answer the first time that it is self-evident. How is it evident to you that the law of non-contradiction holds halfway across the universe? How is that self-evident?
It is apparent. Self-evident simply means it is evident to my perception.
How can you perceive something halfway across the universe?
All I can say is that it's an a priori, self-evident.
No, you just told me it was evident to your senses.
Fact.
You just told me that the law of non-contradiction is evident to your senses.
It's evident to my reason.
Okay. Okay. So in other words, is this just something that you believe?
No, it's something that I intuit.
Okay, but you told me it was self-evident. So if it's self-evident, why would you need to intuit it?
I think those are interchangeable.
I'd like everyone to know I could go on for the next 20 minutes with these simple, clear, and circumspect questions, and all we will get is gobbledygook back and nomenclature-filled answers that simply dodge and muddy the waters. How can something be self-evident halfway across the universe? And then Brenda says, I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. Brenda said that it was self-evident to his senses. Well, it's not self-evident to your senses. Then you told me that you reason that the law of non-contradiction holds. Well, how did you reason that that's the case?
They are, the process of reasoning is to take certain axioms and begin with them. That's how reasoning is done. That's how reasoning is done.
How are you able to use your reason? How are you able to employ your reasoning to determine that it is the case that the law of non-contradiction holds halfway across the universe? How are you able to determine that it is the case, not that you merely believe that is the case?
I don't know how to answer you other than to simply reiterate that they are a priori truths.
And what does that to a ninth grade? How is it self-evident that that's the case? How? Is it self-evident to your senses?
I don't know.
Well, you just told me it's self-evident. If it's not self-evident to your senses, then what other means would it be self-evident that the law of non-contradiction holds halfway across the universe?
Due to the impossibility of them being otherwise.
How are you able to determine that anything is impossible?
Well, if you have a proposal for different setups of
No, it doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what I think. You just said that some things are impossible, did you not? Did you
It's
just
due to
affirm
the
that some things,
impossibility of
right, that some
being
things are
otherwise.
impossible, right?
Right.
Is that your position, that some things are impossible?
Well, it's impossible to think of a
Is
contrary
it
to
your
the
position?
law
I
of
didn't ask you.
non-contradiction.
You see,
The law of
again, I want
identity.
everyone to notice. I want everyone to notice that Brenda responds with answers, not to the questions that I asked. Now, you asserted that some things are impossible. All right. Now, how are you able to determine that in reality that anything is impossible? How are you able to determine that?
Again, you're asking me for a synthetic justification for an analytic truth.
You made an assertion that some things are impossible, did you not?
On the basis of the analytic truth of
Okay,
the basic axioms.
how would you explain that to a ninth grader? If a ninth grader says, I don't know what you mean by analytic truth. If a ninth grader said to you, how are you able to determine that any particular state of affairs is impossible? How would you answer that to a ninth grader?
I took Euclidean geometry in the 8th grade, and this was
okay.
Exactly
Notice, everybody, I'm not getting an answer to my question.
They taught us.
How are you
this is how they taught it to us.
I'd like, okay, Brenda, this is the incoherency of your position. Now, whether it's deliberate or not deliberate, I don't know. Now, I'm going to ask you this question. Since you have asserted that some states of affairs are actually impossible in reality, how were you able to determine that it is the case, as opposed to you merely believing it? How are you able to determine that some things are actually impossible? How could you determine that?
Internally valid.
When I was in the 8th grade, I was shown the basic axioms for Euclidean geometry, and I
You're not answering my. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in geometry.
I simply
I'm interested in you answering my question.
I simply apprehended
you
okay, so in other words, you assert.
A little
you
bit.
assert.
Dawkins, can you hear me?
I'm not interested in talking with you right now.
No, I know that, but other people are interested.
Well, I'll just turn your microphone down. Okay, I'll just wrap it up here saying
other people that
I have asked Brenda a very simple and clear question, and I get a discussion about what.
Yeah, we heard that. We heard you.
Hey, Bree, I'm talking right now. Please don't interrupt.
I know you're not in charge of me. So how about you?
Okay, good. I just muted your microphone. So you see, Brenda cannot answer a simple and basic question.
Really?
All we get is you give verbal gobbledygook, and you see this is why it's a waste of time having a conversation with Brenda. Absolute waste of time.
Okay, you've established now that. Can we have a different conversation?
Okay, I'm not Brenda. Please don't address me. Okay, thank you. See, there you go. Have fun talking with Brenda, everybody.
A priori is not gobbledygook. Hey. I understood it perfectly when I was in the 8th grade.
Dawkins.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
I got rid of those two.
Well, I didn't think Brenda was trying to answer questions.
I was going to clarify what Dawkins said. Is the question was how can you articulate the words you're saying into layman's terms, because not a lot of people would know the term she's talking about. She's talking about. Now, that was the question, anyways.
But she's gone now, so. That's up to you.
Anyway,
like I said, I can address her the way that she wants to be addressed. That's my decision, and you guys can do otherwise.
Okay.
All right. Any conversation you guys want to have?
Well, Metal we were gonna have a conversation, but I guess he's taken off. She's taken off. I don't Metal. I don't know. I assumed you were a guy.
All right.
Yeah.
Did you just assume his gender?
Well, if you want me to call him a girl, if he wants to be called a girl, I will do it.
I'm just playing with you.
I know.
All right.
He wants to go by the name.
Well, I might take off here in a few minutes. I have to get up at 4:30 in the morning to go to Pensacola.
Nice.
But anyways, anything you want to talk to me about?
Me?
Before I head out.
I don't know. I just came in on the end when
Fun.
Matt was here, and then Matt took off, and then Brenda was having the discussion. So.
Well, Dawkins has a way of trying to dominate conversation.
Yeah,
that's Dawkins. Kind of makes me embarrassed to be called a presuppositionalist. I'm sorry, but
yeah, no,
I agree.
To the whole presuppositional apologetic.
Hey, Godless, I haven't seen you for a while. How are you?
Yeah, what happened to your hair?
It's pink and purple now.
Well, it used to be all long. What's going on with you?
It's been short for a while now.
Oh, has it? Okay, it's been that long.
Yeah, I know. It's been like I started cutting it about a year ago. So.
And Len, you appreciate this? If you can see it.
I don't know. What is it?
Len would appreciate that.
Nice. I don't know if Len is the one that's in charge of it.
Yeah, Len's not in here.
Oh, he's not? Oh, never mind.
Len's not in here.
Who's running this? Who's running the Bible Thumping Wingnet then?
Don't know.
John Wilkinson out of the Count Show.
Oh gosh, never mind. I gotta mute. I gotta mute now. I better mute.
So, anyways, was my mic breaking up when I was addressing Brenda?
No.
No, your mic was fine. Finally, earlier though, when you were on the other show, it was pretty bad.
Yeah, I know.
So we may have to go ahead and stop the broadcast, but we're welcome to go ahead and continue on with the discussion off. And I appreciate you guys all coming in. And thank you again for Dawkins and along with everybody else who showed up, I think. And if everything goes good, we will see you all next week.
All right. Cool.
Thank you again for listening.